My name is Rosaire. I'm here today to talk about my sister Anne Therese Marnie. She was a ninth member of our family, beautiful, angelic child. So in the family, there were obviously 9 children. I'm the second eldest, older brother, then myself, then 2 brothers after me, and then 5 other sisters, and Anne being the youngest. So in 1979, I was preparing to go overseas with my girlfriend Louise. And just prior to us getting ready, basically, to go overseas, my girlfriend decided she said, let's do some family photographs. I thought that was a good idea. So Louise came to my house, took photos of my family. We're all there together. And I then in turn went to her family home and took their family photos. We were the first members of both our families to actually travel overseas, so it was a really big deal back then. So anyway, the day of the travel was coming up, and so we all went out to the airport. My whole family came out to say goodbye to me, so it was a really big deal. And I remember before I went through onto the plane, all my family was standing in a half circle, and I remember deliberately looking at each one of them. And as I'm looking at everyone individually, I had this tremendous sense of foreboding. I felt that I wasn't going to see one of them when I came home. I just felt that there was this sense that one of them was not going to be there when I got home, and I don't know when that was going to be. We were going away indefinitely. So I began to cry, and by the time I got onto the plane with my girlfriend, she asked me why was I crying so much? And I just said, I just had this terrible feeling. So I explained that to her. She appeased me, and we got sat on our chair on the plane, and everything was fine after that. So during my travels, Louise and I had booked a Kentucky tour and whatever, and we did that for 3 months and then came back to the UK, worked as chambermaids for a while. And then around about that time, my boyfriend at the time came over and joined us. And we got a flat together with this other Australian woman that we met at Victoria House in London. And we were there, and one morning in the early hours of the morning, at that time, Louise and I had been working at St Matthew's in Islington in the UK, nursing, and she decided to live in the nurses' home while John, myself and Pam lived in Ladbroke Grove in London. Louise came to the house in the early hours of the morning. There was a knock at the door, and I thought that was really odd. But immediately the knock on the door came, I sat bolt upright in bed, knowing what was coming next. I had this sense that something had happened. So I heard John went to the door, and John and Louise were talking in the passageway, and they were whispering. I couldn't hear what they were saying. And as she entered the room, I can still remember to this day, so this is 44 years ago, I can still remember exactly what she was wearing, how she looked. And I looked straight at her before she could say anything to me. I looked at her and I said, which one is it? And I straight away said, it's my brother Stephen, isn't it? And she said, no, it's Anne. So What do you do with that information? I'm so far away from home. I put on my tracksuit and I ran out the door, and I ran and I ran and I ran, trying to escape. John was following me, and I just remember I just kept running and then stopping, trying to breathe, and then just kept running and running and running. So I needed to ring home, clearly. And when I finally phoned home, when I did, because of the time difference, the phone had connected, the home phone had connected to the funeral home. I don't know how they managed to do that, but they did. And so when I phoned, they said the funeral home, and I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I must have the wrong number." And they said, no, is that you, Rosaire? And I said, yes. And they said, oh, it's all right, they've connected the home phone to us, because we knew that you were going to be ringing. So I spoke to all my family individually. They had all said, she looks beautiful. Don't come home. Everything's okay. There's nothing you can do, Rosaire. Everyone said the same thing, as though it was all scripted, which I find out later that it was scripted. My parents, so that I wouldn't worry, they all said to my brothers and sisters, don't alarm Rosaire, just say everything's okay. So I stayed back overseas, and I thought, well, I'm the big sister here. I need to show my family that life goes on. So John and I bought a motorbike, and we travelled around Europe. And then we worked at a pub in Chelsea, pulling beers, and I was the manager of the snack bar. But that was how we sort of kept going until I came back home in the September of 1979. So I was greeted by my whole family. Obviously, they came out to the airport again. Everyone was bright and happy, and obviously just putting on a brave face for me. And I was welcomed by my family, and I was so glad to be home. But when I got home to the family home, I went into my sister's bedroom and sat there. Anyway, the whole time during my grief, I never, ever felt any hatred or condemnation towards the two men that struck my sister. So the news of my sister, how it all happened was that my sister had, at my family home, it was around quite late at night, they wanted to go up to the local milk bar, buy a few things, and then come home. And Mum, one of my sisters had asked Mum, could Anne come with them? And Mum said, yes, as long as you look after your sister. And so they went up to the milk bar, and they were coming home. And when they came home we lived on a dirt road in amongst market gardens and paddocks. And Virginia had to go into the horse paddock to put the horse rug on. And she did that, but while she was doing that, Anne was outside the horse paddock and she was talking to someone. No one was there, but she was talking and laughing and making a daisy chain. And when Virginia came out of the paddock, she said, "Anne, who are you talking to? What were you laughing about?" And she said, "Oh, nothing, no one." But she looked down at her daisy chain and said, "See this? I'm going to wear this when I see God." And 10 minutes later, she was dead. Two cars were racing down our dirt road, which was very rare that any traffic would ever be down there. My father could see the cars coming from a distance and he was yelling out, "Watch the cars!" And Anne was going from one group to the other group, so she was in the middle. And one of the cars struck her and she was catapulted up into the air. And she then died in my father's arms. So one man, the one that struck her, got out of his car, stood by the lamppost while the other man drove off and drove around the corner. You could see him apparently from a distance. As I said, I was in the UK. I wasn't there. But he was around the corner looking from a distance. And my father had told one of my sisters to go inside to tell my mother not to come out. He was trying to protect her. And in hindsight, I think it was probably the wrong thing to do because Mum didn't see Anne at that time. And I think that's one regret that she had. But one of my sisters had come inside and she felt completely enraged and angry and wanted to go out and hit the man at the lamppost. So on her way out of the house, she moved towards the man at the lamppost, feeling completely angry and just wanted to hurt him. And as she's going towards him, she felt this peace and love just come over her. And she got close to him and just embraced him. So there was a court case later on that year. The two men were charged with culpable driving. My father and my sister Gabrielle, who was also there on the evening, were the witnesses. And they got to the court case, and I think it was after the court case, because this is all secondhand information, of course, because I wasn't there, as I said. My father went up to the two men and said to them, "It is not me. It's not for me to judge these men, only God. And if they have any conscience at all, they will have to live with what they've done for the rest of their lives." My father was a very forgiving man. There was nothing that he could have done any more than he could have done. So that's pretty much where my story ends. But of course, we've all got a story to tell about the same situation, but it's all different. Everyone was in a different situation. There were a number of my family members that were away from the house when this happened. One of my brothers, Michael, who was on a night out with a mate and his girlfriend, travelling up Hoddle Street in Melbourne. And he said to his mate, "Oh, mate, turn the car around. I've got to get home." he didn't know where this feeling, he had a feeling that this foreboding, this terrible feeling that he had. He said, turn the car back home, and he was really anxious. And this guy who Michael still knows, Michael only has to open up the conversation to say, mate, do you remember when? And he said, you don't have to say anything, Michael. I remember it clearly. Michael was very agitated on the way home. He was desperate to get home. And when the car came around towards the back of the house down on another dirt road, he could see the ambulance and everyone standing around, and he just knew that something had happened. So this is my sister Anne. She was an angel. She used to come home from school with chewing gum in her hair that children at the school would put in there. And my mother would say, Rosette, would you please comb Anne's hair out and get rid of the chewing gum? This happened on a regular basis because she was so beautiful in every possible way. Beautiful heart, angelic nature, never said a cross word to anybody. She was just so much fun. But these children, she used to sit there and say, why do they do this, Rosaire? And I said, and the only thing I can think of is that because you have got such beautiful hair and you're such a beautiful person, that they don't have what you have. So for many years, I have wanted to find the two men that killed my sister. They got 2 years of culpable driving. I've never been able to find them. But I just wanted to say to them, it's okay. Because their lives will be living in this torturous world where if they've got any conscience at all, as Dad said, they will be living with that. But I've always wanted to say hello to them and tell them it's okay, because I'm not going to be their judge. When Anne was outside the paddock and laughing and giggling and talking to somebody, I firmly believe that she was talking to God. God was very, very present with her. He was basically, I think, preparing her for what was coming. In my home, I have daisy chains on my lampshades as a constant reminder of her and that incident with her. Her and the daisy chain, and that God was present. I have no doubt. And I get comfort from that. As a family, none of us feel anything, any hatred towards the men. None of us do. We knew that it was Anne's time. God's in control of everything. And in turn, he's been in control of my life as well as a result of Anne. It made me a better nurse as well. I had more compassion, more empathy. And looking after the dying was extremely valuable and important to me. And dealing with the relatives of the person who had died was extremely important for the families to have someone around that knew the grief and the pain that they were going through. I grew up in a very faithful household. My parents were Catholics, and I was raised Catholic. I'm now a Christian. I firmly believe that Jesus Christ is our Saviour. He is there in every moment of our lives. He's got me through a lot in my life. And if anyone is ever considering that God isn't real or that he is not there for you, you are sadly mistaken. He is very much alive, very present. And it's a beautiful thing to have that as a comfort. He comforts me. He has comforted all my family. And all of us are okay. We're all okay, and we're all very sane, sensible people. So God is alive. Jesus Christ is alive. Praise God.